I wanted to also just thank you guys because it's been an honor and a privilege getting to teach you guys through Genesis. And we're finishing Genesis today. So a little bit sentimental there, finishing the first book of the Bible. Pretty exciting. Um,
On the videos that got sent out, like the last one was like the Bible Project,
on Job.
and then Job.
Mhm.
Where does Job fall into place?
Yeah, why did I put the Job video? Right, good question. Who here has not read Genesis before and is now sort of coming to? Cool. Awesome. You have you read any of Genesis before? I know this is your first. Okay, so well, we're finishing Genesis today, but that's great because we'll do a quick little summary. Reflecting on the story of Genesis, what are some things that jump out at you?
The patterns that God really uses to like demonstrate their failure and His promises through the generations. I think that's
Right.
pretty cool. I've never read the Bible through through patterns.
Yeah.
But I know you teach that way too.
Right.
Which is really cool to see.
Yeah. Most folk, they are familiar with the Bible in sort of bite-sized pieces for most of their life. And they understand certain stories, but they don't really see the fibers that connect everything together as a pattern in a patterned way, when the text of scripture was written to be read as a sort of whole sweep of it. Yeah. As a saga, right? So that's really cool that you guys see that, the significance of the recurring patterns in the lives of the ancestors, which is the book, or most of the book of Genesis that we've been reading. Okay. So you guys ready to get started into our last meeting? Okay. This is going to be fun. For those who are here for the first time, just holler if you need clarification on certain things. We are finishing up a book. Next weekend will be a great weekend to join as well, because we'll be starting a book, if that makes sense. And so right now we're sort of closing the loop on a lot of things. And next week we'll be starting a lot of concepts and ideas and things, because Genesis and Exodus, they tend to have a couple different focuses that are different. And so as we close the loop on certain elements today, next week will be a great time to join us as well. So just a little bit of a recap. If you guys remember, I'm just sort of summarizing the book of Genesis for you a little bit. Genesis 1 to 11, it's its own little section. Genesis 12 through 50, it's its own section. Genesis 1 to 11 is an epic prologue of the story of the Bible. It focuses on humanity generally. It focuses on this sweeping, a scope of history where we're covering the dawn of the world of human civilization, the fall, the flood, the Nephilim, the Tower of Babel, these epic stories. And then suddenly we're zoomed in on the stories of the ancestors. So these very intimate family dramas, mostly. It's like you go from watching, an epic movie, an epic war movie, let's just say something like that. You go from watching that to a soap opera, right? Because now we're diving deep into family dramas and people doing awful things and making mistakes and treating each other badly. And you're like, whoa, I can't believe he did that. Oh, I can't believe she did that. Or, I can't believe he said this. And these examples where I said last week, I believe it was, that the stakes of sort of the whole world is also manifest in how we treat our family and the people around us. That's sort of what the Bible is presenting, that really the world depends on how we are loving each other and how we are reconciling to each other, or treating each other. Remember that the violence of the world after the fall spirals out from a single source, being the murder of Abel by his brother Cain. The family relationships, the family drama, that's a very significant part of the book of Genesis, right? So just as a recap, Genesis 1 to 11, a prologue and account of the state of things, including creation, the design and operations of the world, the causes of evil and suffering. So those classes were very high level. If you guys remember who were there, they were very conceptual, really helping to frame your worldview and understanding of how things work in the world and what are the sorts of patterns that are manifest in the world. And we covered these things. If you guys remember, the creation, Adam and Eve, and the creation of humanity, the garden, which was what? What's the garden? a temple realm, right? Where Adam and Eve are these king and queen priests of God, representing all of humanity to God and God to humanity. You have their temptation by the serpent, but what is the serpent? At the very least, we can say the serpent is a divine being, a spiritual being conveyed as a serpent in the story, but for all intents and purposes, someone who is created by God, but tempts the woman and the man to disobey their creator, right? You have them exiled from the garden, and then you have their children, in which one murders the other out of jealousy, out of envy, and then from that spirals this chaos. Out of that chaos, more spiritual beings, you guys remember, they try to ascend humanity to a state of godhood in the same way that the serpent is kind of doing in Genesis chapter 3, and they create the Nephilim. That brings on the story of Noah and the flood. And after the flood, we have those same sorts of problems continuing as the Tower of Babel is built, the Tower of Babylon, or the you could say the Empire of Babylon. Babylon being this archetype of the great evil empire of all of history, is always called Babylon in the Bible. Sort of like if you know Star Wars at all, think of the Empire in Star Wars. Think of Babylon, right? If you just trying to help use your imagination to understand what the Bible is getting at, because these great stories that we appreciate, they all come from the Bible. But after all of this epic narrative, remember that's just the first 11 chapters, then we get into the ancestral tales, right? So remember what we have talked about in regard to ancestor tales. These are the foundational level stories that define the people of Israel. The people of Israel being who the rest of the story is about, pretty much all the way up until halfway through the book of Acts. The story is about the people of Israel. It's only until halfway through the book of Acts that it starts really becoming about everyone else as well. But the people of Israel are the ones in whom, as Paul in Romans says, they are the chosen ones. They're the ones chosen to, number one, be the protectors or the guardians of the story of God, the guardians of the oracles of God, the ones who are bringing the story of what God is wanting to do with his creation to the rest of the world. And so when we're talking about the people of Israel, we're talking about their origins. How did they get started? Out of all of the nations, how did they get started? And so that's why on this book, on this document, by the way, if you have this document, I do have a little pitch in all of these sections right at the top. So the top was learn about the origins of the world, humanity, and society, Genesis 1 to 11. The section that we're finishing today, learn why the Bible is about one nation out of all the nations and peoples of the world, right? And so that is what we've been talking about for the past 6 weeks, is the concept of election. Who knows or remembers what election is? What's election? Being selected. Selected for what?
God's plan.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Well, like Abraham was elected,
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes like, Judah,
Mm-hmm.
he's elected to carry on the seed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea here is that throughout the book of Genesis, we have times in which there's multiple options, but God chooses a specific one out of these multiple options. So in Genesis 11 and 12, there's all the nations of the world, but God chooses a specific person, that in this person there will be a generations and generations that come forth from this person. Same thing between Isaac and Ishmael, right? Same thing between Jacob and Esau. Same thing between the 12 sons of Israel. What is the chosen one chosen for?
Save the man.
Okay, great. Excellent. So the one is chosen on behalf of everyone else. Does that make sense? So the chosen one is the one whom God selects to bear the burden of the salvation of the world. So for Abraham, it is in you, in your family, all the families, all the nations of the world will be blessed, right? And this is really important when it comes to understanding what the gospel is. Remember, that is what The Apostle Paul says the gospel is in Galatians, the gospel preached beforehand to Abraham. In you, all the nations will be blessed. So this concept that there's a one who is chosen by God that everyone else points to and says, that's the one that bears the burden of my salvation. So same thing. And then Isaac is the child of promise. In you, the promise of Abraham is continuing. Jacob, the promise of Abraham is continuing. And so that has been the story of Genesis 12 through 50. So going through it again, we have here are the stories that we've covered. We have coming out of Babylon. We have the figure of Abraham who comes into the promised land. And first major event that happens is he wins these great battles against these Babylonian kings. And then he is blessed by the priest king Melchizedek, right? Who is this type of Christ, this king priest of Jerusalem, or the proto-Jerusalem, okay? So this person who represents Jesus. Then we have Abraham's big mess up with the story of Hagar. If you remember, Sarah entices Abraham to essentially have a child with her slave and give birth. And it's this really horrible, awful situation on behalf of Hagar. But coming out of that, we have the promise of Isaac, and sort of sandwiched in the middle there, we have the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. I'll go over what all this means in a few more minutes. We have the birth of Isaac and the binding of Isaac. What's the binding of Isaac story all about?
That's a precursor to Jesus and being sacrificed.
Okay, yeah. Explain that more.
It's by faith, Abraham took Isaac up to sacrifice because that was kind of the worldly custom.
Mm-hmm.
But Isaac, having trust in his father Abraham, carries the stacks of wood, to build the altar for the sacrifice. And then the voice above, Jesus, telling Abraham, stop, by your faith, you fear God, you don't have to sacrifice your son.
And he finds a ram caught in the thicket, right? So yes, the command of God to sacrifice your child, your only son, which is not really his only son, but sacrifice the son of the promise, which is Isaac. Remember that this is it's a pattern story. So the idea here is not that Abraham will sacrifice Isaac, but that Isaac will be spared. That's the ultimate message, because what they're doing is they're representing what Jesus will come to do in the New Testament. Jesus being represented in Isaac and God the Father being represented in Abraham. This binding of Isaac story is really important. So if you weren't there for that, if you don't remember, go back and read that and watch the recordings that we did on that. Isaac's son is Jacob. His other son is Esau. The heart of their story is conflict between those two brothers. If you guys remember, a really intense conflict that threatens Jacob's life. So he is exiled from the land. He has to flee for his life. And that's where he sees the Bethel staircase, right? This connection point between heaven and earth. He sees a portal to heaven, for lack of a better term. And what God is doing in that moment is he is saying to Jacob, you are down and out. You're on the run. You are essentially in mortal danger. You are at your lowest, but that is where I'm meeting you and giving you this promise that I am going to continue this blessing, this promise that I'm going to deliver humanity. I'm going to deliver you through your problems, and I'm ultimately going to make good on my promise to Abraham. In you, all the nations will be blessed. It is when he is out of the promised land that he meets Leah and Rachel. Through all these hijinks and this deception, he ends up marrying both, if you remember that part of the story, very complicated part of the story. But we also have a sister rivalry. So Leah and Rachel, they are a sister rivalry, sister wives, where they are competing for children. They're competing to have children. Whoever has the most children is the better woman, something like that. Out of this situation, their father, Jacob's father-in-law, he has a problem with Jacob. Jacob now has to flee from where he fled to. Okay, so now he has to go back from where he came, and he needs to confront the conflict with his brother Esau. In that flight back to the promised land, he meets who?
Jesus.
So you say Jesus, he meets a visitor in the night, this person who approaches him in sort of this clandestine way, this dark figure that is mysterious, and this figure wrestles with him, right? Like has an actual fight with him. Through that little story, you come to recognize, and it comes to be disclosed to the reader, that this is God on the earth, that this is a manifestation of God in person who is wrestling with Jacob. And there Jacob is renamed into what? Israel. Okay, so now we have, remember, the origins of Israel type of story, that Israel,
That wrestles with God.
one that wrestles with God. Yeah. And so the personhood of Israel manifests in his descendants, right? That they are going to be people who wrestle with God, right? And grapple with God and try to figure out what it means to be in relationship with God and be in relationship with one another. He gives birth to, and he and his wives, they give birth to 12 sons. And what is the story of the 12 sons?
The 12 tribes of Israel.
The patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, and what happens in their story.
Joseph, they sell their brother, who was the favorite one, the second the youngest, the oldest born of Rachel,
Yes.
and they sell him into slavery.
Yeah. Okay. So more of these family conflicts. Joseph is a favorite. He's a miracle child. He's, a wonder child, wonderkind, and his brothers are jealous of him. They don't like him and who he is, and they say, you know what, let's just get rid of him. So the 11 persecute this one by throwing into a pit, selling him into slavery, and he's gone from them for decades, right? That's where we ended the story last time. Who remembers how it ended?
Oh, the what, Tamar?
Okay, yeah, so we had the Tamar story, so that's very important, and we'll get into that. There's Tamar's not Potiphar's wife. Yeah, no. That was the Judah story, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got what happens at the end of the story is Joseph has been sold into slavery in Egypt, but it is there that he realizes that there's going to be a famine for 7 years.
Yeah, he's interpreting the king's dream.
So Pharaoh is having a dream, and Joseph is interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. And what he tells Pharaoh is there's going to be a famine for 7 years. So you need to prepare for this famine. And because he was given this dream, and because he was in Egypt, now at the right hand of the most powerful man in the world, he was able to save the world save civilization through this famine, okay, the 7-year famine. And we talked about how that represents Christ, right? About how Christ becomes our representative at the right hand of the Father who saves the world. But it's through his suffering. It's because he became a slave. It's because he was persecuted by his brothers. It's because of all these elements of his life that he went through that he would very much have preferred not to have gone through. It turned around for the favor of all, right? And remember, that's what we talked about with the chosen one. The chosen one, the elect, is the one who bears a burden. And in bearing that burden, the rest of the world benefits. Okay? And so that is the story of the elect of Genesis. Okay? These figures who are preferred over the other, that they have to go through a level of suffering, they have to go through a level of burden, and then out of that burden is a salvation. Okay? So that's sort of been the pattern of the story of Genesis, especially in these ancestor tales, okay? Just want you to recognize and remember these major events as moments in which God is showing up in the story. The judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah, the binding of Isaac's story, the Bethel staircase. You can go back into the recordings and find all these moments where we discussed these moments throughout the book of Genesis. Genesis is a big book. And then if you want to just also think about this summary, we've been talking about Abraham, we've been talking about Isaac, we've been talking about Jacob, and we've been talking about the 12, okay? So when later parts of the Bible talk about I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it's thinking back to these stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's really important for me, and I know we haven't gotten into the reading just yet today, it's really important for me, for you guys to recognize what is the book of Genesis telling you about God, because that's essentially the main takeaway, or the thing that you should be prioritizing about these stories. What is it telling me about God? Because what it tells you about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is interesting. It helps you understand the story later on. But what is it telling you about God? That's how it connects personally.
So, I personally, for myself, I believe that these stories can be like eye-opening moment, like in our own lives, and for instance, wrestling with God. Well, I confess, I think we've all wrestled with God, um, uh, and just the certain things, the conflict, maybe the family conflict, and just the certain things like that. Like there's so many I can't think of them.
No, that's fine. Anyone else?
His faithfulness.
Okay, God's faithfulness. Despite all of these family conflicts, this is speaking to what you said, despite all of these problems, despite the people of God, the chosen ones of God, continuing to fail time and time and time again, God continues to show up, and God continues to deliver, and God continues to do what he said he would do.
I think it's also a good reminder to not be closed-minded to the blessings of God, like thinking like, oh, I've asked for this specifically, and unless I get this specifically, I don't feel like God's answering my prayer.
Yeah.
And you need to look outside of that and be like, okay, well, yes, I went through this hardship, but he's still blessing me. Like, kind of humble yourself.
Yeah, that's good. Brenda? I'm going to stand, by the way, guys. I just was sort of feeling uncomfortable. Go ahead.
I just think God is awesome because he is the creator of us. And I feel that he intentionally chose one out of a generation to bring people to him, to know him, of his love, of his mercy, of his forgiveness. And he is, even though they messed up, some of them, he still was an intentional God to seek out his purpose in us,
right,
of what he called us to do.
Yeah, it's really good. I want to just,
yesterday in the men's Bible study, Shane brought up a word, a Hebrew word. It's hesed, means steadfast love, loyal love, and I think Genesis, through all the significant mistakes that's in Genesis, God shows hesed throughout all of Genesis, and I think that's what God is trying to show us.
Yeah, loyalty. God's loyalty towards his people. Yeah, good.
When I think about wrestling with God, oftentimes, what I've experienced is when my faith, is wrestling with fear. So we have to let our faith be greater than our fear. And oftentimes, when we're led by fear, it keeps us from doing the very thing that we need to do.
Yeah.
In that case, I guess Jacob was afraid, to meet with his brother Esau.
Yeah.
So he wrestled with his faith in God and his fear.
Excellent insight. Yeah, really good. So I want to just show the different moments that God has shown up in the story and just give you this is the time to take notes if you have a notepad or something like that, because you don't have to, but I'm just saying that if there's anything that I want you to take away from the past many meetings, these are the things that I want you to take away, okay? So in the Hagar story, God sees and cares for the downtrodden and the outcast. God personally shows up to this story of Hagar, this Egyptian slave who has been exploited by her slave masters, Abraham and Sarah. And God meets her there out in the wilderness, and she calls him El Roy, which is the Hebrew for "you are the God who sees me." What do I mean if I say I feel so seen? I feel understood. Yeah. I feel like the person that I'm speaking with or communicating with actually acknowledges and validates the things that I'm struggling with in life. And she calls God, "You are the God who sees me, and I have seen God and lived." And so it's this intimate moment in which God shows up as a person to her and says, "You're going to be okay." God sees and cares for the downtrodden and the outcast. In the story of Sarah going to Hagar's exploiter, again, even in spite of her mistake, God delivers on his promises and performs miracles. Miracles, in the Bible, it's about God doing something unexpected It's about God doing something marvelous and wondrous and something that you recognize that could never be done out of your own power. Okay? And so the miracle in this story is that, of course, Sarah is an old woman, but she's going to give birth to a child. She's gone through the process of menopause. She's gone through the process of, she's no longer fertile, but she's still going to bear a child anyway, the son of the promise that she was promised all the way back at the beginning of the story. Okay? So God delivers. He will deliver when you least expect it. Remember, that's sort of what we talked about in the story there, is that it's when she comes to the end of herself, when it becomes impossible. A miracle is not a miracle unless something is impossible, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it's not a miracle, right?
If you were to have a child earlier in the day, then it would have been like
just the normal way. It wouldn't be a sign. A sign from God is a moment in which God delivers on his promise in such a way that you recognize that it could only be God, because this does not happen. In the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, God is a fair and merciful judge who will personally render justice. So God comes to Sodom and Gomorrah. He personally analyzes the situation. He bargains, or he allows Abraham to bargain with him, and he personally renders the justice that is due to Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, the cry against Sodom and Gomorrah has been great, and it has come to me, and so now I will go and render my justice against Sodom and Gomorrah, this evil city, right? In the story of Isaac, God himself provides the sacrifice for the covenant. Remember, covenants are about relationship. They're about establishing relationship. And in the ancient world, covenants they're mediated via sacrifice. When you enter into a covenant, you perform a sacrifice with the other party. And in the story of the binding of Isaac, the covenant is entered into on behalf of God, right? That God is the one who secures the relationship through the blood that he offers, okay? Of course, this is the story of Jesus, that Jesus establishes. What does he say of the bread and the wine? He says, this is the blood of the new covenant, right? The covenant in my blood, right? So God himself provides the sacrifice to establish relationship with humanity, okay? In the story of Jacob and the staircase to heaven, right? The stairway to heaven, God reveals himself when you are at your lowest. Remember, we said that it is only when Jacob has a rock or a stone for a pillow, right? What does that mean? He's literally homeless. He's out in the wilderness. He has nowhere to go. He's on the run. And it says he takes a stone and he puts it under his head as a pillow, and he dreams, and God meets him there. So God reveals himself. It's sort of the same thing as that miracle, when it's not by your own power, but now you've reached the end of yourself. You've hit rock bottom, and God shows up, okay? In the wrestling, God allows you to wrestle with him, and he offers you blessings in the wrestle. Those blessings are twofold. The blessing of a new name, so a new identity. His name was Heel Grabber. His name was Jacob, but now he will be called, you are the one who wrestles with God, which, if you guys remember, actually has double meanings. It's also he sees God is the other meaning. And the other part of the blessing is actually a wounding, right? It's a chronic mark that Jacob receives. It says he puts his leg out of his socket, and Jacob has a limp for the rest of his life. So that wounding is also a blessing, though, because it is a mark that allows Jacob to recognize that he needs God and that he will need to depend on God, right? And then in the story of Joseph, God will appoint a chosen one who will save the world through suffering. That's the story of Joseph. This one who was given these dreams that he would be the master of his brothers, that he was this figure whom the sun, moon, and stars would bow down to, right? Is what he says to his brothers. And it is in him giving this message to his brothers that his brothers hate him for it, and they throw him into a pit. They sell him into slavery. He goes down into the underworld, right? Metaphorically speaking. And once he reaches the depths of the underworld, metaphorically speaking, he is risen up on high and seated at the right hand of authority of Pharaoh. And when he is seated, he saves the world. If you guys know the Gospels at all, Christ goes down into humanity. He goes down into death. He's risen up and seated at the right hand of the Father and is the intercessor on behalf of all peoples. And so it's the story of Jesus, but in Joseph, okay? Again, go back to last week to hear more about that. And finally, at the end of the story, God is the redeemer of suffering, who makes all things work together for good. So every time someone has suffered in the story of Genesis, it has been roundabout ways that we have come now to this moment in which the people of God are being saved and the nations are being saved through the chosen one who suffered. And so what Joseph is going to do is he's going to understand his suffering of his life, recontextualized in the context of this was all leading to a salvation. Okay. So everything that I went through, all of the persecution against me by my brothers, all the suffering, the years that I spent in prison unjustly, the years that I spent serving people as a slave, the years that all of these elements, I did not see, but now I see that this was leading somewhere, is Joseph's ultimate message. I see now that God was working things out in spite of human evil and suffering, in spite of human sin. God was utilizing the mistakes of humanity to lead to a greatness, a glory, a salvation. Okay? And in that way, the suffering that Joseph receives, that is inflicted upon him, becomes recontextualized and redeemed. Okay? It's reclaimed by God as something that is used by God to bring about his good purposes. Make sense, guys? Those are the messages of the story of Genesis. Okay? So that's what I would like you guys to take away and take home with. Okay? Any thoughts on that? I know we haven't finished the book yet, but I wanted to give you guys this summary. Okay? And then last thing, yeah, he's an awesome God. Amen. Sprouting the seeds of Genesis. If there's one thing to take away, so in spite of all of those things, if you take away one thing from Genesis, it is the idea of sprouting seeds. Sprouting seeds. In this book, so many central themes of later stories have been set up in seed form. So these patterns that we talked about, they have been established in this book, right? All of this has happened as we have followed the genealogical development of the seed of Eve, going back to Genesis 3, the seed of Eve through the lineages of Seth to Shem, to Abraham, to Jacob, and to Judah. As Abraham was promised, in his seed, meaning his offspring, all the nations will be blessed. Every chapter of Genesis is a story of God laying the seedbed, tilling the ground, gardening imagery, tilling the ground and preparing the way for the development of the people of God, which will bring about the Messiah of God, which is Jesus, the Messiah, right? So looking forward to the New Testament all the way back in the book of Genesis. Remember, New Testament is like this half of the book, or this like third of the book, or quarter of the book, right? And we're all the way back here, right? But there's an anticipation of what's to come. That is the child of Eve, the son of the woman, who will crush the head of the serpent. You see how, as you read through the book of Genesis, it is showing you who God is to the people, and it is showing you how the people are continuously the chosen ones, that God is continuously bringing about this promise of deliverance.
And he still does that now with us.
Mm.
Through our own families and our own generation.
Mm-hmm.
He chooses one.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that one, then he'll choose another one.
Right. So, yeah, I'll do an aside before we get into the reading. Recognize that being in Christ, the New Testament church are the chosen ones. Okay? And so when Christ says in the Sermon on the Mount, you are the light of the world, you are the salt of the earth, right? Let your light shine for everyone to see. He is saying you are playing out this role that Abraham is to play. You are recapitulating the story of Jesus. You are the one in your relative sphere. You are the one who can be the blessing to the world, to the people around you, right? That's going to take a burden on you. It is through your suffering that you are ultimately going to bless people. It's through you dying to yourself that you were able to be a servant to others. But yeah, I want you guys to recognize also in these stories the role that you play in being the one who can be a light to the nations, light to the world. We are called the elect of God. How's everyone feeling? Good. All of the things that I just talked about, if you haven't watched the videos of previous weeks, you can go watch and hear from the text itself. And we'll break down the text as we read it in those videos. Every video is recorded, every meeting is recorded, including this one. You guys ready to finish? Sound good? Okay, open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 42. Something I want you to recognize before we read is that Genesis, this is something that I have not said yet. Genesis is a prequel to Exodus. What do I mean by that? Who's familiar with like the Star Wars movies? Yeah? Okay, so George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars in the 70s, he starts telling a story, but he starts telling a story in the middle of the story. When we enter into the book of Exodus, that is when the stories of the Bible start being written. That doesn't mean that the stories of the ancestors were not present, if that makes sense. But everything starts being contextualized within the age or the period, which is the Exodus. Okay. So when you think about it, the book of Genesis is a prequel. So when George Lucas now goes back and does movies 1, 2, and 3, he's telling how we got to movie 4, which is the first movie that came out in the 70s. Okay. So using that as an example for what it means that we are transitioning from Genesis to Exodus.
Because Moses is the one that wrote Genesis, right?
Theoretically, regardless, any of the scripture that you are looking at is always from the lens of the people of Israel as they came out of slavery in Egypt, if that makes sense. Even the people in the future, as they are looking back on things that are not involved with that, like let's say the kings of Israel, let's say David, when he's writing Psalms, oftentimes he's referring to, we came out of Egypt, we came out of slavery. And we'll talk about this next time, why that's so important. But I guess that's the point that I'm trying to get at. That's also when they're talking about things that happened prior. And so with that, we now have one of the most important parts of at the end of the book of Genesis is the fact that they're ending up in Egypt now. It's an explanation for how we got to where we are. Isn't it interesting that they end up in slavery as prophesied by, or told to Abraham prophetically by God, all the way back in Genesis chapter 15, that this was going to happen. But now they end up in Egypt again through this sort of weird turn of events in which they make this horrible mistake. That is, they persecute their brother and they send him into slavery in Egypt. They're all going to end up as slaves in Egypt. Very interesting how that works out. But before that, they're going to reconcile and they're going to be, Joseph living as a king in Egypt. They're going to be honored in Egypt first. But I want you to recognize that the setting now for this week and next week, we're in ancient Egypt. Egypt is a really important location biblically and just generally. It's a really, really foundational level place for the story of humanity. It was the superpower of the ancient world for many generations. Okay, the riches of the tombs of the pharaohs are all over museums all over the world today. Beside like the earlier Babylon, for example, and ancient Rome, it's like Egypt. Oftentimes historians, they sort of draw a link between these great empires, and Egypt stands as one of these pillars of the ancient world, of ancient society, right? And so Egypt, the people of God have been living as these tribal nomads their entire lives, and now they're going to the big world. They're going to the big city, you know what I mean? And it is there that they are going to be, that the rest of this story for this week and next week is going to take place, okay? They're going to be there for 400 years. So very significant. So between this week and next week, there's going to be a 400-year gap. Huh?
It's older than the U.S.
I know, older than the U.S. That's right. So Israel was in Egypt for longer than the U.S. has been a country. So that's significant. But that is really important because, again, the stories of their ancestors, bringing them into an actual nation, people, hundreds of thousands of people, that they are going to have a core identity that is rooted in these ancestor narratives, these stories of where we came from, but also influenced by Egypt as well. And that's going to play into the story. So, because they're a nation that was born in Egypt, for lack of a better term. Okay. And so at this story, we have Joseph. He is the savior, right? It fits this messianic profile of the one who suffered. I've already said this today. The one who suffered, and through his suffering, he was brought up to a place of glory. And in his glory, he saved the world through this wisdom that, we have to store up food for the famine. And now the whole world is streaming to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph in Egypt. All right, so chapter 42. The whole world is coming to the land of Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, but his brothers have not yet. So the sons of Israel have not yet. Chapter 42, verse 1. Okay, you guys ready? When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? I have heard," he said, "that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So again, really important for you to recognize that the verse just prior to this was saying that the whole world was coming to get this grain that is in Egypt, to get these stores of food that are in Egypt. And now the sons of Joseph are coming to get this store of food that is in Egypt through this famine. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went out to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he feared that harm might come to him. Thus the sons of Israel were among the other people who came to buy grain, for the famine had reached the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over all the land. It was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized him, but he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Now pause. That's that makes a lot of sense. It's been a long time, but Joseph has also been encultured as an Egyptian. For more or less at this point, you should be imagining someone who looks like an Egyptian pharaoh, right? An Egyptian, where they are these sheep herders in, these tribal peoples in the land of Canaan. He looks like this very regal pharaoh, okay, and they don't recognize him. Super important. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. Remember, what are those dreams?
That they'll bow down to him.
That they would bow. Yeah. Here's what's happening, right? His brothers are bowing to him. It's the dream that he gave to them that they ultimately persecuted him because, and now it's actually happening, but they don't know it. He said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." That's an idiom for you have come to scope out in a way that you are coming to exploit sort of our resources. They said to him, "No, my lords, your servants have only come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have said to you. You are spies. Here is how you shall be tested. As Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain in prison, in order that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else, as Pharaoh lives, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in a prison for 3 days. So Joseph, what is he doing here? Why is he acting this way?
He's testing them to see if they've changed at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Part of me thinks he doesn't know how to respond. Part of me thinks he's a little flabbergasted at the moment. And it does present in that way as being overwhelmed with emotion later on in the story, right?
Only because all what they did to him. He's
Right.
leery.
So think about this from Joseph's perspective. Again, try to put yourself in Joseph's shoes. As a young man, as a 17-year-old, you had this dream, this prophetic vision given to you by the Holy Spirit that you would be the ruler of your brothers, even though you're the second to last born. And because you disclosed that information, you got thrown into a pit, you got sold into slavery, you got set in prison for years and years and years. And now you are in a place of ultimate authority, second only to Pharaoh. And then those same people come and they're at your mercy. What do you do? Think about these times in which you are in competition maybe with your neighbor and they are treating you poorly. And then suddenly you're in a position of, wow, look, I have what I want. What about you? You have this question of, am I going to be spiteful? And am I going to have contempt? Am I going to treat someone bad because now I'm better than them? Or am I going to extend mercy and grace, forgiveness? There's always people like that in movies, you know, when it's like you see the main character, the underdog, being slighted at the beginning of the movie, and then they've gone through the hero's journey, and now they're in a place of authority, and it's like, how are they going to respond to their bully at the beginning of the movie? It's kind of like that. That's the story that we have encountered here. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here where you are in prison. The rest of you shall go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring the youngest brother to me. Thus your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they agreed to do so. They said to one another, "Alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother when we saw his anguish. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this anguish has come upon us." They are essentially saying, what goes around comes around. We are reaping what we sowed, and we're suffering now because of what we did. Then Reuben answered them, "Did I not tell you to not wrong the boy? But you would not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. So again, he is so encultured in the people of Egypt that even he is presenting himself as speaking the Egyptian language, whereas they are speaking the Hebrew language. So very interesting. I'm not going to, we haven't gotten there yet. Part of me wonders, this is my own speculation, because I don't know if it really discloses it. Maybe I'm misremembering. But I sort of think his desire to get Benjamin away from his brothers is almost him being protective of Benjamin. Okay? So just a thought. He was the youngest who was persecuted by his brothers. Maybe he is thinking, these people are awful. My own younger brother, he needs to be protected by me, right? So just a thought. It could be that way.
Because he's also the favor of Rachel, and that's where...
Right. Exactly. So the idea here is that maybe, you know, again, they are going to dislike him in the same way that they disliked me, and they're going to persecute him in the same way that they persecuted me. Okay, so he turned away from them and wept, and then returned and spoke to them. So again, it's very emotional for Joseph, and you should be imagining this emotion, this level of emotion. This is the climax of the book of Genesis. It's the climax of these narratives of family strife and family conflict, and there's an emotional aspect to it, right?
I would have wept too.
Yeah, right. Well, and we do when we have these conflicts, let's say decades-long conflicts with family members that are suddenly maybe coming to a resolution in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's an emotional experience, right? He had picked out Simeon and had him bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to return every man's money to his sack and to give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. So he does this little trick, sort of in his father's footsteps. This deception. What is this deception that he's doing?
He put the money back in their sacks as a sign, like, kind of stole from them, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to give them reason to get stopped.
Mm-hmm. So it's another test. He's making them appear guilty, right? He's making them appear guilty in such a way that he knows that they're guilty. So to them, this is someone who doesn't know their guilt. It already disclosed that, because as they are talking about this awful thing that they did to their brother, they don't think he can hear them, because they're speaking in their own language and he's speaking in a different language, but he knows their language. So their guilt is something that has to be disclosed between the sons of Israel and between Joseph. In their own eyes, they have to appear before him as guilty, not covering up, not appearing unguilty, but appearing guilty.
I think another way maybe of saying it is he's letting God work to get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, that's the important aspect, is the only way that they will reconcile is if that, on Joseph's part, that he would be able to reconcile to them, is if they fess up to their guilt. And so he himself is providing a way that makes them look guilty in the eyes of this person, this Pharaoh-like person that they don't recognize, right? Because ultimately that is going to be the catalyst that causes the reconciliation, is when they fess up, ultimately. Does that make sense? So he's essentially saying they have to come and stand before me and bear the weight of their guilt, right? They have to not be all covered up. They have to not be showing themselves to be all good. They have to acknowledge before me and come before me broken. Are you guys understanding? I haven't said it outright. Coming before God, what is the thing that we need to do to come before God in true relationship and reconciliation with him? Humble, acknowledging our sin, acknowledging our wrongdoing, saying, God, I have done wrong. And the repentance comes through that confession. And so it's a motivation towards confession that let's say the sons of Israel, they represent the people of God or humanity, sinful humanity. And Joseph, he represents Jesus in this moment. And coming before the crown, coming before the person who has ultimate authority, you have to not be all covered up and act good and act like you're all right and act like you are more than you actually are, which is someone who is sinful.
I think that's why God chose Joseph, though, because he was obedient to his father. And God seen the obedience of him as being truthful.
Yeah.
Because if he wasn't truthful, he could be very vindictive towards them.
Yeah.
But God knew.
Sure. Yeah. And so I'm trying to analyze why Joseph is going through these steps of testing. He's not coming out right and catching them. He's giving them opportunities for them to fess up themselves, to come clean, to be honest. That he doesn't have to say, I know what you did. I'm Joseph. I have ultimate authority. I have ultimate power. You're under my boot now. It's that they have to come to this acknowledgement and this realization themselves and confess to this person. Okay? And that's what they're going to do. So again, he gives them a mark, or he does this thing that confirms them as guilty in their own eyes before him, which is he leaves the money in the bag. Okay? So now they're guilty. So now if they're going to show up again, because they're going back to get their brother, and if they're going to show up again, they're going to have to come as guilty men before me, right? And be completely at my disposal of mercy. Everyone's tracking with me there. Okay. They loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. When one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money at the top of the sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in my sack. At this, they lost heart and turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? So again, they are now fearful. They can't go back in their own mind. I can't go back before Pharaoh. I'm guilty. Or be the right hand of Pharaoh, right? I can't go back to Joseph, to this figure that they don't know is Joseph, because we are guilty in his eyes. They came to their father Jacob, the land of Canaan, and they told him all that happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us and charged us with spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man said, the Lord of the land said to us, by this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, take grain for the famine of your households, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that you are not spies and honest men. Then I will release your brother to you, that you may trade in the land. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each one's sack was his bag of money. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. And their father said to them, I am the one you have bereaved of children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. So remember, Simeon is locked up in Egypt still. Joseph sort of hung on to him, right? Yeah. All this has happened to me. Then Reuben said to his father, you may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hand and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If harm should come to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring my gray hairs down with sorrow to Sheol. So they don't really know what to do. And they're only pausing out of the lack of necessity to do something. Okay. So we're gonna, I guess, leave Simeon there, locked up. So a gap of time has passed. They're going to rely on this grain for a while that they first got. So again, there's a hesitancy to go before, even though their brother is locked up. There's a hesitancy to go back because of this guilt that they now recognize as they're bearing before Joseph. Right. Okay. Genesis 43. Now the famine was severe in the land, And when they had eaten up the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But you will not send him. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' Israel said, 'Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' What we told him was in answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy with me, and let us be on our way, so that we may live and not die, you and we, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. You can hold me accountable for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry them down as a present to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, resin, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the top of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and be on your way again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he may send back your other brother and Benjamin. As for me, I am bereaved of my children. I am bereaved." So the men took the present, and they took double the money with them, as well as Benjamin. They went on their way down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. All right, here we go. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." The man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money replaced in our sacks for the first time that we have been brought in, so that he may have an opportunity to fall upon us, to make slaves of us and take our donkeys." So again, they are scared. They are trembling. But again, they have to appear before God, theoretically, metaphorically speaking. They have to appear before the person in power, the person who has ultimate authority to judge them. And he is giving them a feast. Okay? So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house, spoke with him at the entrance of the house. They said, "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and we came up to the lodging place. We opened our sacks, and there was each one's money at the top of his sack. Our money was in full weight. So we have brought it back with us. Moreover, we have brought down with us additional money to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." He replied, "Rest assured, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father must have put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them. When the steward had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water and washed their feet, and when they had given their donkeys fodder, they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would dine there. So isn't that very significant? The steward says, "I got the money for the grain, so I don't know what you're talking about." So whose money was in the sacks?
Joseph.
It was Joseph's money. Guys, come now. Seriously, you understand what's going on. You see how it's Jesus's money that buys our salvation, right? Even though we are guilty, and we recognize ourselves as guilty, and we are caught before God as guilty, but we're not actually guilty. He paid the money.
He paid the way.
He paid the grain, the price. You guys see how significant that is? And then he invites them to a feast, right? The wedding supper of the Lamb, communion table, all these things. You understand?
Yeah.
Really significant. Okay, where are we? It's just that it should like jump out of you and be like, what? How is this happening? How are we reading the story at the front of the book and it's giving you everything that you need to know about the gospel?
And also think about the people in the New Testament that have heard these stories for so long.
Right.
Like, hopefully it clicked.
Right. Well, when you have in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, post everything that Jesus does in the full revelation of God, right? And he says, all the scriptures are about me and things like that. Throughout the book of Acts, multiple times it says they did a little Bible study, essentially, and they like connected all the dots and they were like, oh, right. Okay. I get it now. I said last week, I gave the metaphor of, pieces of metal, sort of imagine they're floating in ether. You put a magnet in the middle and everything aligns. That is this story, right? Because it's a very mysterious story until you understand how the Bible is going to continue to elaborate on this story and say, look at the perfect, genuine manifestation of that story, okay?
Yeah, but why didn't the Pharisees put the dots together? They know the first 5 books of the Torah.
Okay, so that's an important question. No, it plays into this story. It plays into the story. Many of the Pharisees do. Paul's a Pharisee, Nicodemus is a Pharisee, Joseph of Arimathea, so the Pharisees. But I know what you're talking about. Why don't the people who persecute Jesus understand?
Right, because they knew this like by the age of 12. Like they
Right.
had to memorize this.
It's part of the story. It's part of the story. Okay, so let's get into it's here. It's here in the story. Okay. When Joseph came home, they brought him the present they had carried into the house and bowed to the ground before him. He inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" So he's really concerned that his father is still alive, right? They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and did obstinance. Then he looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." With that, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with affection for his brother, and he was about to weep. So he went into a private room and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, "Serve the meal." They served him by himself, and then them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that was an abomination to the Egyptians. Little subtle thing for the next book, right? A ethnic divide between the Egyptians and the Hebrews, right? When they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his birthright and the youngest according to his youth, the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much of any of theirs. So they drank and were merry. Okay, so everything's good, right? But something still needs to happen. A revelation still needs to take place. And that revelation is who this person genuinely is, who this leader of the land is. Then he commanded the steward of his house, "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money at the top of his sack. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the top of the sack of the youngest, with his money for the grain." And he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. When they had gone only a short distance from the city, Joseph said to his steward, "Go, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you returned evil for good? Why have you stolen my silver cup? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks? Does he not indeed use it for divination? You have done wrong in doing this.'" There might be a question about what this means. We can talk about that if you guys want, but I want to get through the story, so maybe after. When he overtook them, he repeated these words to them. They said to him, "Why does my Lord speak with such words as these? Far be it from your servants that they should do such a thing. Look, the money that we found at the top of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. Why then will we steal silver or gold from the Lord's house? Should it be found with any one of your servants, let him die. Moreover, the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves." He said, so they're saying, if we have stolen, then that doesn't make any sense, and kill us then, right? He said, "Even so, in accordance with your words, let it be. He with whom it is found shall become my slave, but the rest of you shall go free." Then each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. He searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then each one loaded his donkey and returned to the city. Benjamin, the one about whom they said to their father, "Let him come down with us," this is now the one who's at the mercy, in their eyes, of Joseph. Remember, my interpretation is that Joseph's ultimate goal is to have an excuse to take Benjamin, right? To spare him from his brothers. That's my interpretation. Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house while he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that one such as I can practice divination?" So this idea, again, that there's this special knowledge. There's a question here about what that means, but we can talk about that another time. And Judah said, "What can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Here we are then, my Lord's slaves, both we and also the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the one in whose possession the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. So pause. So Judah, speaking on behalf of his brothers and behalf of Benjamin, what doesn't he do right there? What did they do the first time? And how is it different than what he did here? When Judah is speaking to Joseph, what he's not saying is, we didn't steal the cup. He's not offering a defense for himself. He's just simply saying, we're at your mercy. And he's saying, take all of us, right? But then Joseph says, no, I'm going to take the one who appears as guilty, Benjamin, who is not really guilty. So again, like, think about how much this is remixing all of the different, everyone gets to play Christ in this story to a certain extent, because the one who's not guilty is the one on whom the punishment is going to come. Benjamin is not guilty of selling Joseph into slavery, but now this sin that represents that original sin, now the punishment is going to come upon him. But then Judah gets to play Jesus because he comes around and offers his life in Benjamin's stead. But this is what's significant is, again, there's not a defense. Oh, we're not guilty. Even though Joseph has manufactured the situation, there's just an acknowledgement of their guilt. Okay. So he's saying, I'm going to take Benjamin, and you guys are good. You're good to go. Then Judah stepped up to him and said, O my Lord, let your servant please speak a word in my Lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me so that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go, only if our youngest brother goes down with us will we go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our younger brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, as I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. So he's referring to Joseph. If you take this one also from me, and harm comes to them, you will bring my gray hairs down in sorrow to Sheol. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then his life is bound up on the boy's life, and when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. For your servants will bring the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. So he will die of grief. For your servant became surety for the boy to my father, saying, so now he's speaking of himself, became surety of the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame in the sight of my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord in place of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father. So, what is Judah doing here?
He's recapping on everything that Joseph wanted them to do. Mm-hmm. They did it.
Mm-hmm. And he's offering himself in Benjamin's place. Okay, so remember, Benjamin is the one who is not guilty, but now is suffering the guilt of the brothers. And Judah is also now the one who is coming back around and offering his life in the place of Benjamin and the rest of his brothers. And remember that character arc that we talked about last time. Do you guys remember the character arc of Judah from last week in the story of Tamar? That he's someone who abandons his responsibility, wants to, he sleeps with Tamar, who's posing as a prostitute. Then when she appears with children, he goes to have her killed. She says, it's your children, and she provides proof of that. And he goes through this character arc. He was abandoning his responsibility. He was neglecting his responsibility to Tamar. And now, he was sort of sleazy to begin with. And now he is showing this honor and dignity, right?
Wasn't it Judah also that, if I remember right, where when they were going to kill Joseph, and he's the one who says, no, you cannot do that.
That would be Reuben, I believe.
Oh, was that Reuben?
But for Judah, it's not a when he's the one that suggests they sell him into slavery.
Yeah, he suggested that.
I think for that it's it's not supposed to be seen as sort of this good thing. The point is like we're going to benefit even more from his demise.
Life, though, in a way, because they were going to kill him.
I believe, yeah. It depends on how you want to read it, but yeah. Okay, almost done, guys. Genesis 45, next chapter. So at this sight of Judah offering himself up for this brother, it's the complete reversal of the behavior of the brothers back at the beginning. That they were bullies to their younger sibling, that they threw him into a pit, that they sold him into slavery. They're not throwing on under the bus. They are their brother's keeper. They're responsible for him. They're responsible to him. And they're going to, Judah is offering himself so that Benjamin could be spared. And this is what sets Joseph off. Okay. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him. So every time he has lost control, he's, been composed enough to go into the other room. Now, it's all coming apart. So he lost control. Being no longer in control of himself, before all who stood by him, he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So he stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So all the Egyptians, away with you. It's just us now. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. So even though they're gone, man, this is a big moment. And the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph." And his immediate question, "Is my father still alive?" So again, you can understand the emotional aspect of this story. But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed they were at his presence. So you can understand that for so long, for years and years and years and years, they thought that Joseph is gone, that we sold him into slavery, and who knows what happened to him. Sayonara. But now he's the leader that they have been, communicating with for all this time, right? The leader of Egypt. The one whom they dined with, who they had this feast with. So for such a long time, the savior of the world through this famine, who was their own, they didn't know him as their own.
Yeah.
And then eventually they know, okay? All right. You guys are, we'll talk more about that in a second. What time is it? Okay. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me here before you to preserve life." So a hint at that big message at the end of the story. But think about that. Joseph, what did I say? Joseph's entire story is recontextualized in light of this story. All the suffering he went through, the years and years and years of suffering, now he looks at it different, right? Mm-hmm. "For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler of all the land of Egypt. Hurry, go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all of Egypt. Come down, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come into poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after his brothers talked with him. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, "Joseph's brothers have come." Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this and load your animals and go back to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me, so that I give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you may enjoy the fat of the land." We're going to go ahead and stop there for now. So the famine has 5 more years to go, but there is a revelation in the midst of the famine of the reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers, okay? He was hidden from them for a long time, but now they have been reconciled. Really significant. Okay, so now we're going to get into the slides for a few minutes. We did a lot of reading. You guys ready? So, of course, we have Joseph. We have the 12. And this is what I want to show you. The care that Judah has for his brother. It's the opposite of the sorts of things that Cain would say about his brother Abel, all the way back in Genesis chapter 4. So the idea that he doesn't take his brother's life, he doesn't throw his brother's life under the bus, but he offers himself in the place of his brother, that his brother is going to suffer this punishment, but he offers himself. That it's this sort of acknowledgement of, I am my brother's keeper, right? So Cain asks of God rhetorically and with this attitude after he has killed Abel, who am I to know where Abel has been? Am I my brother's keeper? Of course he knows, because he just murdered him, right? But at the end of Genesis, you have one brother saying of his other brother, I will offer myself in his stead. I will take care of him. And I am responsible for him. So that's what being a brother's keeper. I'm responsible, for his well-being. So you see how in the people of Israel, all of the stuff of the fall that happened in the first chapters is now being followed up on, and we're seeing examples of within the people of Israel, they're reversing what happened in the past. Okay, and that is the key theme of Scripture, and the key theme. I've already talked about this with the story of Jacob and Esau. The key theme of Scripture, and the key theme of Genesis is reconciliation between hostile brothers. Reconciliation between hostile brothers and reconciliation between God and humanity. That is the story of this book of the Bible and the whole Bible. The resolution of the family stories of Israel continually involve some sort of reconciliation. At the end of Jacob's story, he reunites with his brother Esau, the both of them graciously receiving one another. The culmination of the sister rivalry of Leah and Rachel ultimately is with the reunification of the brothers with Joseph, the favored son of Jacob. Judah, through his self-sacrifice, and Joseph, through his forgiveness, together foreshadow the perfect character and love of Christ. When the sons of Israel are gathered together in reconciliation, it's a glorious moment that sort of is a follow-up of all of the family conflicts. I talked at the beginning of the meeting about all of this family drama that we have time and again throughout the story, right? Now we have a very, very uplifting, heartwarming end to the book, which is rare in the Bible, at least in the Old Testament, I'll just say that. It's rare that you have a moment in which things look great. There's a beautiful reconciliation. It should be an example to you of what reconciliation looks like between hostile brothers and neighbors, okay? Now, I'm going to deviate for a second. There is a very interesting element of the story of Tamar that we did not cover last week. Do you guys remember what that is?
The children?
The children. The children and the red thread. So, yeah, the twins. Sort of a mysterious little part of the story, if I'll go back to that and I can just read it to you, that final paragraph. So at the end of this chapter, remember, the story of Judah is that I've already talked about it a little bit in recap, but he has children with this woman, Tamar. Those children are twins. Really important story because it is part of the genealogy of Jesus, right? That Judah, his sons, are going to become the kings of Israel, and Jesus is the ultimate king of Israel, right? So when you follow the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1 or Luke chapter 2, it goes back to this story at one point in those chapters. So let's just read it. When the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound on his hand a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother, and she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was Perez, which means breach or breakthrough. Afterwards his brother came out with the crimson thread still on his hand. His name was Zerah, which means seed. That's the Hebrew word for seed. Okay. What is up with the story? Why is it in the Bible? You guys know that no prophet just puts random things in the Bible, okay? It's very intentional. If it's in the Bible, it's important. Okay? And as I have said, often the most mysterious stories are very important. It's in their puzzle that it makes them important. So what do you think is going on here? Try to interpret it for a second.
Well, there's a struggle, I guess.
Okay, so the story of Esau.
Symbolic to with Esau and Jacob.
So how is Esau described?
Warrior.
Red.
Yeah.
He's red. He's all red, right? And he is the firstborn. But the true chosen one is who? Jacob. Okay, so really good. More interpretations.
The switcheroo, how the first one came out, went back, and then the...
Okay, so what is that? What is that switcheroo?
I want to say that's also Esau and Jacob.
The blessing.
Okay,
Yeah.
what about it?
Well, the oldest one was supposed to get it, but they deceived. And the mom.
Okay. So one appears like the firstborn and has the mark of the firstborn, but comes out second. Okay. More interpretations.
Is that like the like for Jacob and Esau and the blessing being given to the second son, the upside down?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I know you were talking about how one takeaway from Genesis is like the sprouting seeds. And I don't know.
Yeah.
One of them being named after a seed.
Yeah.
There's something important with
Absolutely.
lineage.
It's really interesting how there are two sons of Judah, Perez and Zerah. Perez, that's the problem. Is he the firstborn or is he the secondborn? Answer for me that. Is he the firstborn or is he the secondborn?
The second, like, was it completely born? The first?
Wait, which one are we talking about? Is Perez first or secondborn?
Well, here he is going to be the firstborn because Zerah.
But Zerah has the mark of the firstborn.
He was breached, but he wasn't birthed.
But he went back and did.
He drew back his hand.
He drew back.
And then
Okay.
Sarah.
Okay.
Sarah.
Perez. So again, answer for me this question. Who is the firstborn? Perez. But Zerah has the mark of the firstborn.
Right.
So
he's the second.
Okay. All right.
I think
Jesus is always the answer.
Jesus, yeah.
It's almost a tie.
It's almost a tie. Okay, great. It's almost a tie. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
talking about the second coming?
Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. To a certain extent, yes. Okay. Who are the chosen people of God? Israel. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Who are you?
We're grafted.
Grafted into Israel. Okay. So are you the firstborn? Or is Israel the firstborn?
Israel.
Israel's the firstborn. But are you the people of God?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let me compare this story with something else, okay? No, it's fine. It's fine. It's confusing. So the red thread mystery. Tamar gives birth to twins, two sons of Judah. So two sons of Judah, right? During their birth, one son sticks out his hand. Thus, he is marked as the firstborn with a red thread. Yet this one pulls his hand back, and Perez is actually born first, making him the unexpected firstborn. Then Zerah is born second and comes out with the red thread marking him as the firstborn, still tied around his arm. What is the meaning of this mysterious turn of events? I'm going to compare it with another story. Joseph's hidden identity. After being sold into slavery by his brothers, the sons of Israel, Joseph ascends to ultimate authority over the land and saves the world through a famine. The nations of that day come to recognize Joseph in Egypt as the one in whom they are able to find rescue through the catastrophe, while ironically his identity remains hidden from his brothers. In the end, Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers and they are reconciled to him. What is the connection between these two stories? Anyone? Okay, so the people of God, Israel, the firstborn, what do they do to Jesus? They, along with the Romans, reject their Messiah. They reject him, they curse him, and they say, we are not to bow down before you. Okay? They're the firstborn. But their rejection of Jesus, what does that do for the rest of us?
Saves us.
How?
Well,
It opens it up for us to be able to be
grafted.
Okay. So the people of God reject the Messiah of God, and that opens it up for the nations to be blessed in the Messiah. So one sticks out their hand and is chosen, firstborn, pulls it back. The secondborn actually comes first. And then the second one comes out still bearing the wrist mark. Okay? So still the chosen ones that come out second. In the story of Joseph, all the nations of the world come to receive their blessing from Joseph, whom to Israel, they don't recognize him as their own. I want to point to you Romans chapter 11. So I asked, did the Jews stumble in order that they might fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the nations, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the nations, how much more will their full inclusion mean? And then later on in the chapter, lest you be wise in your own sight, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery, brothers. A partial hardening has come upon a part of Israel until the fullness of the nations has come in, and in this way, all Israel will be saved. So there is a very key understanding that an element of the second coming of Jesus is the recognition of the Messiah of Israel by the people of Israel. That when Israel recognizes Jesus as their Messiah, corporately, nationally, that is the second coming. That they're blind now, but in the future, the identity of Joseph is revealed after the nations have been brought in. Very metaphorical speaking here, of course. Hopefully you guys are tracking with me. But this is what happens when you have mysterious stories, okay? So what I'm telling you, I'll just say outright, I have not read in other places about this red thread mystery. I think it's the right interpretation, though. That's all I'll say. It's my interpretation. I think it makes sense. Because these mysterious stories, you have to think about them mostly as prophetic. Otherwise, why are they there? The prophets thought that there's something here. And there's something about this pattern of the firstborn who is not really the firstborn coming after the real firstborn, if that makes sense. And so what you have in the story of the Bible is the rejection of Jesus by the Jews, by many of the Jews, nationally the Jews, but him being recognized as the Jewish Messiah by everyone else. So we all recognize Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, but if you go to the streets of the land of Israel today and you tell them, let's just say, have you read Isaiah chapter 53, their side of the Bible, they will have not read it. They don't even know how to recognize their own Messiah. So the blindness has come upon them, like with the brothers of Joseph. Okay? And what happens in the second coming is a enlightenment. And again, why is Paul talking about this example of no, the sons of Israel, they are going to recognize, right? That they will be included, that they will be come back around. Right? Hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. So what I see in the story of the red thread is someone is marked as the firstborn but is pulled back. They pull themselves back. And the secondborn, the Gentiles, the nations, are the people of God that ultimately will come back around, that the people of Israel understand Jesus as their Messiah. I know that's really complicated and it has a lot, there's a lot of assumed knowledge that goes into what I just said. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry. I just wanted to sort of present that for you. Any thoughts about that?
That's good. No, I see what, there's just so many correlations in the Bible, you know, and insights like that, and I think it's God's fine lining of showing Himself.
Right. So you guys buy it? Maybe not. Okay, you like it.
I will say, okay, this is why. Going from, again, we're taking the entire story of the Bible as one story that leads to Jesus. So I'm always going back to the whole Tower of Babel, everything split. The different Elohim now are in charge of things, and God is going to take His people that I'm going to be in charge of.
Right.
But in order, though, to bring the nations through Him, because now now God's choosing to operate in a specific way. He's not going to go outside of what He said how He's going to do it.
Yeah.
So I got to take these people, but I don't want just these people. I want everybody.
I want everyone.
In order to do that, there's certain things that have to happen where it can't just always be Israel, because then it's just, well, this is our God, whatever, and they won't.
Absolutely.
Some things have to happen.
Yeah.
That bring all the nations
before
then Israel themselves goes.
Yeah.
Now I see it in the positive way, not the jealous. That's our God.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's a good thing, but I feel like these things have to happen, because if Christ has to die for all of us, like, how does that happen if it's just in Israel and for Israel, and the rest of the world doesn't even really get to see or know this somehow, unless Israel says, you guys take it. I don't even want it. That's how He gets out to everybody, and how then everybody gets pulled back in. So I feel like because God has to operate in this whole one family through which all the nations, this is kind of like how He's operating.
Absolutely. Paul's main point in Romans chapter 11 is to say, don't look at the Jews and say, well, God has just screwed them over, right? They are still, he says, they're beloved on behalf of the patriarchs. Okay? And what he's talking about is he's talking about the book of Genesis. And so again, that's why I'm connecting Genesis, this chapter in Genesis, to Romans 11. He says they are the chosen ones, right? They are the elect of God. They are beloved on behalf of the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? So don't think that God has just screwed them over. He hasn't. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. And in that way, all Israel will be saved, he says. Does that make sense, guys? And I think that, personally, I think that this is a little image, a little metaphor of what that means.
The verse that was coming to me was in Luke 13:30. It says, and indeed there are last who will be first.
Yeah.
And there are the first who will be last.
Absolutely.
I was looking to see, okay, well, that's talking about the narrow path, where it says, strive to enter through the narrow gate, for many, I will say to you, will seek to enter and will not be able to.
Yeah.
But that's the verse that came to me, was
Yeah.
the first will be last and last will be.
A lot of what Jesus says in that vein is about this very principle that you're getting at. The first will be last, the last will be first. That speaks about the people of Israel too. About the last in the eyes of Israel of that day are the nations, are the dogs, right? Are those dirty Gentiles, right? They're the last, but they're going to be the ones first. They're going to receive generations upon generations of unity in Christ, right? And then the genuine first will be last, right? They'll come at the end. Another example is the prodigal son story. We always hear that preached on a personal level. It's a story of Israel and the Gentiles, because the elder son, the firstborn son, he's jealous of the riches that are being bestowed upon the secondborn son, who went out from his father's house and got drunk and spent all of his money and, became living in a pigsty. And he comes back, the father welcomes back, the brother is jealous and estranges himself. You see what I'm saying? That story is left ambiguous. But the point here is the eldest brother, the genuine firstborn, is jealous of the secondborn's status as being elevated, right? So.
By the way, I took on part of this. I don't know if you did chapter 41 at all, but it says, then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen. Basically, when the son is restored, he's given a ring, and a robe.
Yeah, that's true. So he's remixing the story a lot. Yeah. Jesus definitely has this in mind. There are other parables that talk about what he anticipates is going to be the rejection of the Jewish Messiah by the Jews nationally, but the receiving Don't get me wrong. Most of the New Testament is written by Jewish people of Israel. And within the first century church, it's Jew and Gentile together. That's part of the point. But on a national level, the institution of Israel, they reject. The Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, they all reject him as Messiah.
It's from the Jews.
It's from the Jews. But for the moment, it's not for them. That's what the irony. A hardening has come upon them. Yeah.
The church is Jewish.
Right, exactly.
And then moves into the Gentile.
Exactly.
So it's people groups.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the big factor.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not talking about individuals. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why Jesus talks to the Pharisees and says, truly the tax collectors and the sinners are getting in before you.
There you go.
And again, he's saying all these other people are not instead of you.
Right.
He's saying before you. Like, you'll get there. But right now, these are the guys who are getting in.
Exactly.
But eventually, they're getting there. But it's just you're going to get there after.
So for me, whenever I have a question about why is this in the Bible, this is a really mysterious story. Oftentimes, it's because it's a prophetic riddle. And I think that that's the answer to this. That's just me, though. Okay? I did look for this in other places. I did not find it. There are other things like Hagar's red thread, who is a Gentile. So there's a lot of different things. But turn to Genesis chapter 49. So, Jacob has now come to the land of Egypt. And when he's here, his last words are going to be these prophecies. So the prophecies of Jacob. Jacob's concluding statements of his life focus primarily on delivering targeted oracles regarding the 12 tribes of Israel. When looking on the rest of the story of the kingdom of Israel throughout the Bible, this chapter jumps out as an immensely foundational one in retrospect. Jacob's oracles reflect on the past behaviors of the 12 sons shown in Genesis and look forward to future events, which will define each of the 12 tribes. Remember, the 12 sons of Israel, they're not just individuals. They are nations unto themselves, for lack of a better term. They are tribes. They're whole people groups that are going to come forth from these people. So if you're part of the tribe of Naphtali, for example, you look back to your forefather, Naphtali, and you are defined by the clan that he set up, right? The clan that he established. You're also finding that they are located in a certain spot. So it's not just that we are talking about people and people groups. We're also talking about the borders of their lands. And that's super important. And when we get into the book of Joshua, we're going to talk about the land a lot, okay? So that you guys sort of understand what's going on. People reading this in its original context, as I said last time, they're reading these passages by Jacob, and what they're thinking about is not necessarily just these individuals. They're talking about people living in their present day. So if you're talking about Levi is said that he's not going to get his own land, they're say, that's true. Levi is living in the land of Judah. All the people of the tribe of Levi, they live here with Judah. If you're talking about Zebulun, yes, they live in the north by the coast, which is what Jacob said, So it's more than just these individual things. But unfortunately, we don't have time to go through everyone's prophecy. Maybe we'll go into it when we go talk about the land and stuff like that, because it has to do with the land. What we need to read is the prophecy about Judah, though. Okay? Judah and Joseph, mostly. So let's go ahead and do that. So you guys are in Genesis 49. Is that right? Okay, let me pull up here just so that you can see it. And we're going to pick up at verse 8. Okay? This is Jacob's prophecy to Judah. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches down. He stretches out like a lion, like a lioness who dares rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and the obedience of the peoples is his. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine and his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. So remember, Judah means celebration. Yehuda is the tribe from which the Messiah is prophesied to come later on in the Bible. The Messiah being the anointed one, the King of Israel. Judah's name means sing praise or celebration, which is fitting, as it is through this lineage that salvation will be secured and the serpent's head crushed. Judah the patriarch will play a pivotal role in the story, which concludes in this reference to the Lion of Judah, a common messianic title, the Lion of Judah. Who's heard that before? Lion of Judah. Okay, so he's the fourth son of Jacob. He's a leading brother. So in this story, of course, he was a leading brother. He's the intercessor on behalf of Benjamin to Joseph. He's the father of Perez, right? And when you look at these genealogies of the kings of Israel, Perez is an important figure. He's the one over Zerah in whom the nations, or excuse me, the tribes of Israel have a king. Okay, so let's look at this more thoroughly. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. So just like in the story of Joseph, the brothers are praising the one. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow before you. You will be a strong and mighty warrior who has victory over his enemies. All of the rest of the sons of Israel, they will bow before you, right? Judah is a lion's cub for the prey, my son, you've gone up. He crouches down. He stretches out like a lion, like a lioness. Who dares arouse him? Pause. What is significant about lions?
Majestic.
Okay. Majesty, strength. What about a crouching lion? What is a crouching lion?
It's about to pounce on its prey.
Yeah. I am way more scared of a crouching lion than I am of a roaring lion. That's all I'm going to say. We think of a lion's roar as the power, the scary thing. It does assert authority, territorially speaking. But a crouching lion, that's scary, okay? That's a lion who's ready to strike. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him and the obedience of the people is his. What's that talking about? What's a scepter? A stick. Okay, but is it just a stick?
That's what kings have.
Yeah, why do kings have it?
It says the ruler's staff.
The ruler's staff, yeah. Why do kings have sticks?
Authority.
Authority. Why?
Well, from God.
But what does it mean? What does the stick functionally do? If I have a stick right here,
It's striking.
Extends power.
it extends. It's an extension of myself and authority. What does a shepherd have? A staff. What is the staff meant for?
Herding the sheep.
Gathering, guiding. Okay. It's an extension to have something in my hand that is a symbol of my authority. It's an important element of my authority that I have this staff, this scepter, as the shepherd of the nations, right? Or the shepherd of the people. The king has a staff, a shepherding staff, okay? A scepter. Until tribute comes to him and the obedience of the people's his. What does that mean?
So people recognize his authority.
So the scepter shall not depart. The until there don't mean that at some point the staff departs. The idea here is that the scepter will be in perpetuity present until this moment that is important, which is the moment that the obedience of the peoples is his. Some translations will translate it directly, saying until the obedience of the nations is his. And then binding his foal or his colt to the choice vine. What's important about a colt and a donkey?
Jesus.
So everyone know that a donkey and a colt, it's a donkey, a mother donkey and her child that often are paired together. Yeah, so when Jesus rides a donkey into Jerusalem as what? What is he doing? Or how is he appearing as he rides a donkey?
As the Messiah.
As the Messiah, as the king. And then it says, as it was written in Zechariah the prophet, he's referring to Zechariah, but Zechariah is referring to Jacob. Just think about that. That's not the only prophetic passage about the king riding the donkey. He washes his garments in wine and his robe in the blood of grapes. Why is he saying that?
Oh, the blood stain. Yeah.
Red stained royal garments, right? Communion, the wine, this is my blood. It's teeming with prophecy, for sure, that the New Testament writers are looking at this as a fundamental passage as defining Jesus. Let's just talk about the lion imagery a little bit more. So lions have been a key animal archetype of royalty among many cultures. They are commonly associated as rulers of the animal realm due to their unmatched strength, authority, and territorial nature. In Jacob's prophecy, Judah is described using lion-centric language, and a pattern is established for this symbolic language to be used elsewhere in Scripture. Yahweh, or the Most High God of Israel, is also described as the crouching lion of Israel. Okay? Whoa. So who is the king of Israel and who is the crouching lion of Israel? Is it the son of Judah, the lion of Judah, or is it Yahweh? Yes. This statue is depicting an Egyptian pharaoh as a lion. So think about that for a second. Jacob's in Egypt. What's like a really, really fundamental and like you all know that you're looking at Egypt when you see this thing? The pyramids, but what's next to the pyramids? The Sphinx, yeah, which is a Lion King. So the idea they're in Egypt, the imagery of kings and lions drawing on this Egyptian imagery that will be adopted by the Israelites and go into David as he slays a lion and all these things, okay? So, of course, in Revelation, this is confirmed. Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So this person that is being described, according to John in Revelation, is Jesus. Is he talking about Judah? Is he talking about David? He's talking about Jesus, ultimately. The perfect archetype of the king of Israel, the perfect archetype of the king of the world, is this person that is being described by Jacob in this chapter. So we're in the front of the book, and here is your prophecy. We're in the first book, and here is your definitive prophecy about a king of Israel, who is the Lion of Judah, who is the serpent crusher. And then, of course, Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion, shout, daughter Jerusalem, see, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Zechariah didn't make that up, and he wasn't directly necessarily that just randomly inspired by God to write that. That is drawing on an earlier tradition, which is Genesis 49. And then, of course, the New Testament writers, when they brought the colt to Jesus, they threw their cloaks over it. He sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others spread branches, and they had cut in the fields. And what are they shouting? Hosanna, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the Son of David.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's all coming together. Excellent. All right, guys. We don't have to read the final chapter. I want you to recognize, though, we talked about it already a little bit, but the main idea of this story, the main idea of the book of Genesis, is that humans screw up, they do awful things, and God, in his infinite power, infinite goodness, infinite wisdom, manufactures history in such a way that it all is redeemed in the end. What we plan, what humanity plans for evil, God plans for good. And that's important for you to recognize. It's the same Hebrew word both times. Joseph uses the same Hebrew word to refer to the dual parts that both his brothers and God himself have to play in his exile to Egypt. Remember, he said, God sent me here. God sent me into this place. You guys sold me into slavery, but it was God ultimately that had sovereignty over the situation, and it was his plan that I would bring about a salvation. The complexity of divine sovereignty is automatically clear. Humanity's sin actions are 100% against God's will in nature, yet God is all-wise and all-powerful to be able to use the mistakes of humanity to bring about good and desirable ends. Of course, that is the crucifixion story. Everything is wrong about that story from the side of humanity. They should not be doing this. They're wrong for doing this. This is the worst thing in all of history. But from God's perspective, it is his ultimate expression of love. It is the best thing in history. It is their salvation that is being carried out. So from the human point of view, all of our wrongdoing seems meaningless and pointless. From God's point of view, he's using everything. It's not his desire that we would sin, but we live in a world of brokenness. We live in a world of the fall. And God doesn't abandon us there. He orders it all for his purposes. And this is the story of every patriarch. Every mistake that they made led to something or another coming back around. The story of Jacob, the story of Abraham. Joseph says in the story You planned evil against me, but God planned good. It's the Tov and Ra, so the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Remember, Tov is the Hebrew word for good, meaning things that build up, that build towards purpose, that build towards intention, God's intention. Ra is the thing that tears down God's intention. So think about how significant that is. They seek to subvert God's intentions. He has a dream and it says, I had a dream and the sun, moon, and stars are going to be bowing down before me. And they say, let's kill the dreamer. So they're trying to subvert what God has planned, not realizing that their subversion of what God has planned is bringing about what God planned.
Yeah, that's true.
The sovereignty of God to have complete control over the situation. Even when things look like they're spiraling out of control, God is coming back around and turning it in on itself to bring about his good purposes and his good plans. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. We know all things work together. So all things are organized together and coalesce for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. That doesn't mean you will always have answers in this life, which is why I include that video about Job. So a really good text. It's a long book, but a really good text to pair with Genesis chapter 50 and the story of Joseph. The story follows a man who suffers immense loss and hardship despite being someone of integrity and righteousness. Job wrestles with deep questions of justice, suffering, and God's hidden purposes as Job's friends insist that his suffering must be due to some sort of hidden sin in Job's life. In the end, God himself gives a lengthy speech. He does not give any direct answers, and that's the power of the book of Job. You could say to me, wow, this sounds really good. In the book of Genesis, Joseph was able to recognize that all his suffering had meaning and it was meant for something. But that's not always going to be true.
I was going to say, Joseph said they were lucky. They kind of saw the little coming to fruition type thing.
It doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it does in the end. And that's what everyone's hope of heaven is. That God makes right every wrong. Nothing is ever left open-ended.
Every tear will be wiped away.
Yeah, every tear. So God does not give any direct answers, but reveals his power, wisdom, and sovereignty over creation. So he says, go watch the video, but he says, look at the world and look at how infinitely complex it is. You don't understand, and that's okay. But what does it also say? He gives him double back what he lost. Every tear will be wiped away, okay? So Message of Job portrays the grand scope and design of the cosmos as being beyond human comprehension. Thus, true faith is trust in God's goodness even when life seems unjust or incomprehensible. In the end, Job's hope is in God's arrival as the Redeemer who will set all things right. And I'll just read this verse. Yet I know, this is from Job, yet I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end he will stand on the earth. Even after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. So even hope of resurrection there. So the ultimate message, through death comes new life. This is the story of the Bible. Thank you guys so much. That concludes the book of Genesis.
Thank you.
Next time, we're in Exodus. New things are going to be happening. We're going to be looking at new things. So we've been in a book that has 50 chapters. We've been repeating ourselves a lot just so that we can drive home the book of Genesis. But hopefully you know the book of Genesis a little bit more. You're a little bit more familiar with it now. Before we get into Exodus next week, on Thursday, we're doing that movie night, 6:30 in this room, unless I tell you otherwise. We're going to watch The Prince of Egypt at 6:30 Thursday. You can sign up for the potluck. I'll send the email and you'll get the link again to sign up for the potluck if you want to bring something. Okay? Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your patience as we were finishing there. Okay. Thank you guys. It's been an honor.